So welcome everyone once more to the pop-up webinar on Making the Shift to Online Learning, Emergency Preparedness, and Instructional Continuity. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Dr. Shubha Kashyap, who is the Director of Online Learning Design and Innovation for the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan, to help get us started today. The floor is all yours, Shubha.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us on a Friday afternoon to talk about contingency planning. You can't get more exciting than that. I think all of us panelists have been talking about how we've stepped away from our desks just in time to do this webinar, and maybe many of you are doing the same. So we're so glad you fit us into your schedules on such short notice. It was just such a hot topic, and Paloma and Caitlin have been wonderful in getting the logistics of this together. So thank you for joining us. I would like to briefly introduce our panelists, who you will see, they all have their cameras on. We have Dr. Luke Dowden online here, who's Alamo College's District Chief Online Learning Officer and Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Prior to that, he was at University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and he was he was the inaugural winner of the Bruce Chalou Award for Early Award Career Excellence. We have Guy Lotrikiano, who's also online, who's the Associate Dean for Innovative and Collaborative Pedagogy at George Washington University and is an associate professor of School of Medicine in Health Sciences. And we have John Vivolo, who is the director of online education at the Katz School of Science and Health at Yeshiva University, and prior to that was at NYU School of Engineering. And we have Marlene Lee Kang also online with us. She's the executive director of the Lawrence Enfield Center for Entrepreneurship at Baruch College. So these are your participants today. Thank you for joining us. Normally I would let everyone introduce themselves, but we just have so much to get through today. I'm just gonna jump right into questions. So while we're setting the context for today's webinar, there's so many things we can talk about related to contingency planning, and more news is coming up every day, actually at every hour at this point. And so what we are looking to do to focus on today's webinar is focus on strategic planning and implementation. There are going to be other conversations happening, but we're really focusing on strategic planning and implementation using instructional technology and online education solutions to maintain instructional continuity. Again, we could have a we could have a whole conference on this, but for purposes of this afternoon, we're really focusing on instructional continuity and using online education resources and what that looks like at a strategic planning and implementation level. The Sloan Consortium, formerly known as Sloan Consortium, has actually a definition around what academic continuity is, and we will include that resource in the post distribution. But there are, I will just read it for you here. It's the process of maintaining continuity of learning in a crisis situation caused by natural disaster, human-induced or man-made disaster, or precipitating factor. It's the extent to which operations can be sustained, which enable affected faculty, staff, and students to continue academic activities during the response and recovery phases despite disruption caused by the crisis. So I'm sure you're looking at this and thinking, yes, this is me right now. This is what's happening. So our goal here is to talk about how can we help our learners maintain their academic progress and maintain academic continuity through this conversation. While there's so many dimensions to planning, I think we're just gonna jump in here with our questions. So with that, I'm gonna ask each panelist to help us. Can you describe how online learning is supporting the strategic priorities and planning for your institution related to this academic contingency planning. I can tell you from our perspective, and there's so many overlapping ideas, but for the University of Michigan, the College of Engineering, one of the areas where we're focusing is making data-driven decisions. We're looking at enrollment, we're looking at specific courses, class sizes, the leverage of various resources to help scale and manage the planning. So with that, Luke, you want to jump in here?
Sure. So good to be with all of you. Just to give you an idea of where we are in the world, I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I work for 5 independently accredited Hispanic serving institutions, all community colleges that are organized under the Alamo Colleges District. So just to be clear, we're community colleges here. I know there are a number of you on the call. We've really been focused on being clear about the problem we were trying to solve. And Shuba, to your point about data, so how many courses are not online already, right? And have you just looked at some basic data about where you are? And then if you're at a institution where you provision a course in your learning management system for every course in your registration system, then how many of those are turned on? Right? So we're doing some basic just level set of what does our world really look like? The other thing is about getting ourselves organized to do this work, right? So if you don't have emergency operations centers or you don't have emergency operations centers within your system, so they may be at some of your campuses, but not all of your campuses, how are you going to organize yourself to do that work? So I have some other things to say, Shuba, but that's where I would start, the conversation for us.
Okay, excellent. Marlene, do you want to take the next part of that? Oh, you'll want to unmute your mic.
There you go. So just piggybacking off of sort of that high level list of things that you want to accomplish. And so starting off with where I am, I'm at Brooke College. We're one of 25 colleges. We have 18,000 students. There's 275,000 students within our university system. And so it's a daunting task to have continuity of instruction in the wake of any need. And so looking at scale and looking at what our resources are, and from my own experience, tapping into already developed resources is key. And sometimes you just don't remember that in the immediate need of addressing your task at hand. And so sometimes you should really think about what's already at my fingertips and can I tap into it? And I will talk a little bit more as we go through this presentation on what those sort of resources look like.
Excellent. John.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us, for joining me. So Yeshiva University is a little different because if you haven't heard the news, we actually have some students that do have the coronavirus, and it was in the news. You can look it up. And so we needed a more immediate plan. We were already planning, and we've got over 6,000 students at my particular school, the CATS School of Science and Health. We're a relatively new school, but we have a smaller population of only about 60 faculty to train, but at the same time, the rest of the university has to respond. We've been talking since the outbreak about what to do, but as soon as the outbreak happened, in which we closed our campuses down. We live in New York City, there are 9 million people, and there's a big fear of it spreading very quickly, so we did close our campus down. We happen to have, luckily now, some Jewish holidays coming up, so we're closed until next Wednesday. But I had to immediately put together a way to very quickly train faculty how to use a tool like Zoom to help augment and possibly offer classes online with our Canvas account, with Canvas, and seeing what's there. So it's a lot of just auditing, like other people said, what's on Canvas now, who has classes, and things like that. But a lot of it's leveraging things very quickly. In fact, just before I was training some faculty about how we would do that if we decide to move fully online. We have not decided that yet, but it's still that idea of what do we do in the meantime, because we could have a major outbreak in New York City at any time, which is scary, but you got to be able to come up with a plan to train people very quickly to go online without overwhelming them.
Great. Guy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Guy Lotrecchiano, and as was stated, I'm at George Washington University. I run our central instructional core for advocacy, research, and excellence in teaching and learning. So as a central unit, we support the 10 schools at George Washington University. We're lucky in that this past year we had developed our continuity plan and it was put into action. Of course, it was designed primarily for inclement weather, but it works just as well under these circumstances. In fact, we haven't had any inclement weather, so we're actually utilizing it now. Our planning in the last couple weeks has been very much to establish strong communications with our entire university, the department chairs, faculty. We have a network of instructional leaders in the form of designers, senior associate deans, et cetera. We've been very much about creating that communication plan so that it's seamless, so that we're all speaking of one voice. We have put together a phasical plan leading to the end of March, which has a rollout of expanded trainings, new venues for trainings. I could talk more specifically about that. But the most important part of what we're finding right now is that our university has decided that by the end of spring break, which is 2 weeks from now, all coursework should be ready to move over to online platforms. We have, after analysis of the types of courses, about 3,500 courses that fit criteria that need to move from traditional face-to-face to some format online. So we have a big job in front of us. I'm a team of about 24 people, so I can speak more specifically as to what we're doing in the next round of questions.
Great, thank you. So this next question here is for those of you who are just getting started, or filled out a form that your central office had you fill out, and you stuck it in a drawer somewhere, and now it's time to dust it off and see what it looks like. So one of the questions I'm starting with, for those that are in early stages, we have about 600 people online. For those that are in early stages, what are your tips for getting started with instructional continuity plans?
Oh, go ahead, Marlene.
So, yeah, Marlene, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just jump in just for the overarching level of just starting with your staff, and let's keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS. So keep it simple, keep it succinct, and it'll be just an easier transition as opposed to overwhelming your community. And I'm speaking from the standpoint of a unit that has mainly staff in operations that have stakeholders across the community. And so I know the rest of the panelists have more likely have faculty as their stakeholders and students, and so they'll go into more into the instructional piece of it.
Thank you. So John, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. So imagine that the problem we have often with universities is that we sit and plan and talk and have meetings about meetings. If you're in the early stages, sit down and go, okay, this just happened today. What do we do now in this moment? So there needs to be a rapid response mechanism in place that says we can plan out as much as we want, but do we have a rapid response? Because like a hurricane, you've got 4 or 5 days to prepare. An earthquake, you have no time to repair. A particular instance like happening now, you have some time to prepare, but then all of a sudden it hits you. So I would say you need to put together what's your rapid response. What are some predetermined communications you can send to faculty and students? Do you have a platform in place like Zoom that you can immediately start hosting training all of a sudden? When Hurricane Sandy hit New York, and which Marlene actually were working together at the same time, and we were at NYU, we didn't have a response plan right away, but we didn't have any way to rapidly respond. We were able to do it. So planning is great. Early stages is great to plan, but have a rapid response of what do we do within an hour to reach out to people and help them.
Excellent. Guy, you want to talk a little bit about early tips?
Yeah, I would support what's been said already by Marlene and John. I think for those who might feel at all overwhelmed at the moment, which I'm sure there are many people who do, I would isolate what you know you can provide early. And it's not necessary to give your clients, whoever they are, instructors, whomever, 10 choices. They may want 10 choices, but I would highly recommend being aware of what you can manage, especially as you need to scale up. So in our case, what we did is we were very intentional to say we have a means for everyone to do, some sort of collaborate session like Collaborate Ultra. That's what we're recommending if you want to do that. If you want to take your existing slides and turn it into something, use VoiceThread. We were very specific, and we were aiming for the user who, quite frankly, can't handle a lot of options. We give them very few options to say, this is all about getting over this hump. I also want to just add to that, I think everyone should look at this emergency situation as a scalable opportunity. You have the opportunity, while you have everyone's attention, to move the needle from maybe nowhere for someone who never teaches online at all to the next, the next stepping stone. So think immediately and beyond from a developmental standpoint, because we hope that through this experience, we can build on what these new users might learn through this emergency situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Luke, what are your thoughts on this? I know you and I chatted a little bit about this yesterday, and you want to talk a little bit about your early tips for getting started on this?
Sure, and John, Guy, and Marlene have made some excellent points. I would say to you, you've got to get very clear on your priority. Like for the Alamo Colleges District with 64,000 credit students, 100,000 when you put in our non-credit, we are focused on continuity of instruction and on helping students finish the semester. I mean, and that level of clarity allows a lot of other things to find their way in or find their place in your priorities. I had a conversation, Shuba, this morning with our chief HR officer, and she made the comment to me. She said, we've got to give ourselves permission to focus on this work. And that means some other things may need to be delayed or moved. And I would say that is that I would highly encourage you, if you're a leader on the call or if you're an advisor to a leader, is have you given people permission to focus on the work? And that means not focusing on other things. So that may sound real basic, but freeing people up to do the work. In my case, it's did I get the permission to organize the teams that I needed to organize? I work at a very matrixed organization, right? And we're very focused and high performing, but what are the temporary rules of engagement, or what are temporary rules of engagement we need to instill, which may become long-term, right? That can help us move and serve a large number of people. And so the final thing, so getting the right permission to work with groups. So I need 6 departments to train 5,000 faculty, staff, administrators, right? The last thing I'd say to you, Shuba, is, and this is important, especially, there's a question for our folks that have career technical education programs or our allied health faculty and those of you that serve allied health, please encourage them to reach out to their program accreditors. Program accreditors are thinking about this. They'll help you think through this. The other thing is I would be preparing requests to your state boards about possible extensions of your semester, because you have to start to think about the financial impacts, right, of what canceling a part of a term or a whole term would be. And so I just want to encourage you to please ask for help. I know that our U.S. Department of Ed Financial Aid Office issued a document last night. If you've not seen that, I find it extremely helpful. So I think our accreditors want to help at this time, program accreditors, state boards. So I know that's a lot of information, Shuba, but I want to make sure that we kind of get ourselves oriented to, there are other people that want to help and being focused on asking for that and getting that level of guidance.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you for mentioning that report. So that was, the report that I saw as well. And I think that they were very intentional about some of the language they used. And it'll be interesting for each institution. If you haven't looked at it already, there are a couple of releases related to some flexibility that they're offering and how this impacts Title IV funding and financial aid. So I would urge everyone to take a look at that. The U.S. Department of Education just released it, I would say, less than 24 hours ago, and WCET, and I think OLC will link to it as well. So we are actually, just so I'm seeing there are a couple questions about links for resources specifically from the panelists, and then this link, I will work with our webinar organizers to ensure we pass some of that information along to you. I also wanted to add, here at the University of Michigan and the College of Engineering, we have a long, 20-year history of faculty in online education, and then we have some that have never done it. And I think that's going to be very common across institutions. And so what we're trying to do is balance self-service opportunities, like here's how you can help take care of this on your own, and here are some ways that we can scale consulting services or scale ways to create consultations so that we can maybe bring two people together that have common questions. But part of this is letting them know that we're here to help you. Even if we're not here to develop an entire online course, we are here to help you in the interim to get you started, because our ability to scale also depends on some people having the tools to do it themselves. And we do have very capable faculty that know how to do it. We just need to point them in the right direction. So we're balancing self-service and consultation in this environment. Okay, so then I will jump up to another question here related specifically to faculty services. So just as, we're hearing various workplaces are getting used to the idea of working from home or remote work. For some people, they've been doing it for years. For some people, they're just realizing that this might be a thing that they have to consider. And maybe they have to re-examine their rules and what sort of constraints they may have previously had around remote work. So just as we've had workplaces dabbling into this in various stages, we have online institutions or universities that are also in various stages. So some of them are highly experienced and can quickly scale. And we already offer entire degrees online. This is no problem. The others are saying, like, we've never done this before, or we have pockets of expertise, but they may rely on lecture capture. It's not campus-wide, or they use technology that they can't necessarily remotely access. Can you tell us a little bit about the strategies and tactics that you're putting in place for faculty services for the remote instructional continuity? Guy, do you want to start with us on this one?
Sure. I think something that we often take very for granted is that our system requirements, especially if we're using university or organizational laptops, et cetera, are pretty standardized. When we move to the possibility of everyone being remote, you may have some people working on systems that do not have the proper requirements to handle some of the things we're talking about. So now is the time to start to think about, in conjunction with your IT departments who are already thinking about this, I can assure you, what you should be doing to prepare for the possible eventuality that you'll have 24 hours maybe for everyone to stay home. So it's really important that once someone goes home, that they can be functional. That will require, if no work has been done in the area of system requirements, that could be a nightmare because there's no way to, sort of fix that on the fly. Of course, know your boundaries. We've said that already. If I have a bad internet provider, that there's nothing my university can do about that. Know what you can do and know what you can't do. I think for many who are working with staff especially, but also instructors. Remember that there may be remote work that is necessary for any number of reasons. You have employees that are immunosuppressed that shouldn't be at work anyway. I mean, it might not all come at the stroke of midnight on a particular day. Units may be sent home before other units are sent home. So I think anything you can do for yourself to get around, you know, what we've already done, an open school plan and a closed school plan, meaning what's the difference when you can still come to work and get certain services on site versus when you can't come to work because you're not allowed to, you know, so think about the differences, and now would be the time to think through what absolutely needs to be done to prepare for the eventuality that some, if not all, of your learning professionals are going to be at home or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Marlene, thoughts on the types of services you've been providing faculty to prepare for this?
So at the very top of our current situations, I asked myself 3 questions. Who do we serve? Do we need to serve them while we're in an emergency or a crisis? And are there other needs of the department that need to continue while we're in an emergency? And just a good example is payroll, right? And so I asked myself those questions, and then how do I keep it short and simple to address those and keep the continuity of the work flowing? And I did that by utilizing the resources we already have. We have a university file storage system that I made sure all of my staff has access to or has downloaded and put it onto their, installed on their computers. They have communications tools, the ones that we could use internally, so that way we can still stay in touch with each other. And just like as any other chit chat or walking over to someone's desk to ask a question, and then a communication tool to interact and engage with students, to engage with the community, our clients if necessary, so that there's still ways to continue to operate. And then we went old school too. Had that old school phone tree, so that way we can stay in touch with each other and do safety check-ins, because you just never know. John mentioned that when we were at NYU, we went through Superstorm Sandy and we couldn't find one of our staff members for a week. And so it was just detrimental not knowing what it is that was going on with her, and also not being prepared for reaching out in multiple ways. So I'm having that phone tree have home phone number, cell phone number, personal email address, and your actual physical address, because what if we need to send someone to knock on your door? So we started off with that, and that's just as a department set of strategies. But as I mentioned before about leveraging other resources, as a university, we have all of these partners that either corporate or agencies or other organizations that have these sort of strategies already in place. And they're probably so much more robust than we already have or have access to or need to build. And so I guess the best way to leverage that is to first ask, what do they have in place, and are they willing to extend it? And I guess I could talk a little more later about what sort of resources I've come to experience and surveyed other corporations in the past to understand what it is they're willing to do for you as a partner.
Thank you. So Luke, services you've helped faculty with to maintain remote instructional continuity, especially, you know, focusing on your faculty.
Right. So I told you about our context a little earlier because we have 5 independently accredited colleges, right? And so all of the things I've said are within that context and to serve the number of people. So I'll give you the framework we're using, Shubha, because I think that's probably helpful from some of the chat that I'm seeing is, so what teams need to be organized across our entire district, right? What's our instruction mode? So we have 5 vice presidents of academic success. We created a decision matrix with these topics, teams, instruction mode, and they made those decisions, right? So putting your decision makers in a position where they can make decisions. The next was, what was the minimal amount of content that we needed faculty to move to the LMS who were not already using the LMS, right? Because then that helps to drive the training that we'll need. So again, back to this theme of getting really focused, as John talked about earlier. Then course template. So was there a template we could put in for people that weren't using Canvas that would relieve some of the stress of what are the tech support links and what about academic support online and how are students going to get that? What are the core set of tools? And it's been mentioned a lot on here, but for us, our first core tool might be Zoom, right? Or our first core tool might be the LMS. Again, back to the data about your usage and or your ability to deploy those resources rapidly. The other piece, Shuba, I would say, is our training faculty. So what's the format going to be? For us, it's a boot camp, and it's in what modalities? And we have 3 modalities. So and then how are we tracking that faculty got what they needed, right? So we used a matrix. We had specific topics. We got agreements. When we started to refer to those as core agreements, and now those core agreements are driving individual or specific tasks. The other piece that I didn't tell you is, have we told students that about this new world that they'll be in temporarily? And how are we preparing them? So as you have to make sure you have alignment between what you're preparing your faculty and saying, do this, and how you're telling your students, this face-to-face course, you're going to experience a little differently during this time of appropriate social distancing. So hopefully that matrix will help you, create the one that works for your context. That worked well for ours. And I know that was about 9 items, but those were 9 critical agreements we needed to make before we can move forward.
Yeah, I like this idea of the matrix, because this is one of those things where, and somebody mentioned earlier, there may be 7 different ways to address it, but at this point we need to quickly get to 2 or 3, and how can we scale it with the resources we have? This is sort of the next thing on our list as well. So I will be tapping you for that matrix if I can, but I think the idea of making one for that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, yeah, we'll try to get that out. It's not a pretty document, I'll just warn all of you, right?
Yeah, no problem. I think at this point we're ready to borrow things from everyone to get our own started. So thank you. John, faculty services.
It's wonderful to think that you can work from home in a normal situation. I commute an hour and 45 minutes in the morning and in the afternoon, and I'm working from home now. Regardless of your staff, faculty, student support, faculty support, but at the same time, and like Guy said, there are technical requirements. Does everybody have a laptop? Strong internet? Are you telling people to use their personal computers as opposed to a school computer? And those are things to think about, and we don't realize that. I have my work computer home, but what if somebody doesn't have a computer at home or doesn't want to use their computer at home? And if you're servicing faculty and you have to be involved in accessing, and I think Guy said this, accessing student systems or institutional systems, you're probably going to need a VPN. Does everybody know how to access the VPN? I can't access anything at my school without going through a VPN. So I wouldn't be able to access the registration system or the recruitment system without actually having a VPN. Do I have the ability to do that? So there's all these questions you have to figure out beforehand is, does everybody know how to actually access a VPN? Who needs access to it? Does everybody have computers at home to be able to take care of this? It's not realistic to say, we're going to give every faculty member a laptop. We're going to give every staff member a laptop in this case. That could be an enormous expense. Some of the schools that we're talking about here, like Marlene at CUNY, hundreds of thousands of faculty and students and staff. You're not going to buy all that. So what is the solution? Perhaps have an agreement that says if there's an emergency situation, will you work from home and use your own computer? Do you have the ability to do this? And maybe people are going to say, yes, I would do it. But not everybody would do it. So just think about that. Also, strategies is about non-technical things. Every morning, me and my team meet through a Zoom and talk to each other. How's the day going? What's going on? What do we need to do today? And the same thing at the end of the day, because people can very easily fall into a slump of sitting at home and working. And that sort of non-technical measurement of working from home is not easy to do. It's fun, but it's still hard to work alone, independent, and isolated from everybody else when you're not and teaching as well.
Thank you.
Can I,
Go ahead, Guy.
Could I just add, before we leave this topic, one of the strategies that we're utilizing, our center is within the libraries and academic innovation, and maybe others are, I'm sure there's more that are as well. We are actually, as a leadership team, creating a checklist for all our employees to do things like we just stated. Make sure they update their personal information with HR that they can get into, make sure they can access the VPN, you know, doing these things now. But checklists are really helpful for people because you're saying, here are all the things you need to think about. And if you can't check off one of these boxes, come talk to us and we'll help you, rather than finding out the hard way when no one can do anything about it.
That's a good point. You know, the other thing that I'm remembering is as we're talking about preparation and making sure that we are prepared when we do need to act, we're prepared. Everything from VPN to making sure computers are updated or they know where to access information. It's also a good time to remind people about how to handle cybersecurity and personally identifiable information. It's already a large conversation that people should be taking very seriously. But when you have even more of a distributed workforce using various levels of personal or other institutional devices, it becomes even that more important. And so that's one of those things that I think when you're preparing your institutions and your faculty, that's another thing to keep in mind here as well. And, you know, just add one more thing to the list, but I think that when we're working with student information, it's an important thing to remember. So I guess after all this, one of the things I want to ask is, through your experiences, so some of you have personal experience in working through Superstorm Sandy. You know, we remember, I was just talking to Ray Schroeder a couple of weeks ago about Sloan semester, and we were in New Orleans when we were having this conversation. So what an interesting sort of situation. So people remember Sloan semester with Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, various other situations. Our colleagues in Puerto Rico have been through quite a bit, our colleagues in California. And so, or maybe this is your first experience in contingency planning. Can you describe either what's gone well or strengths that have emerged through this contingency planning work? And I think Marlene, jump in here.
So I guess this is a good segue to what I was leading to about tapping into resources. We were not prepared. We were an online learning unit, and we were prepared, but no one else was necessarily prepared for the calamity of what we were experiencing. And so there were so many issues with just power in general and access to resources and getting in touch with each other. And so after the Superstorm Sandy, we learned a very valuable lesson: prepare, right? And so one of the resources we tapped into were our corporate partners. And so we've tried to figure out how hard was everyone hit with lack of resources, meaning our faculty, our students, and our staff. And whether our corporate partners were willing to extend whatever their planning was for us as a partner institution. And what we found was they had such a robust set of resources, things like printing services, because paper is not dead, internet access, laptop loaners, actually off-site centers for accessing computer terminals and other resources like that. And they were so willing to extend those resources to us as a partner institution, whatever local universities were around them and their surrounding communities. The nice part is that usually these larger organizations, they're financially able to do this, and they're willing to do this because they're just sizable. But they also have multiple locations. So as online learning units, your students and your faculty may not be within 50-mile radius of you, but also elsewhere, and have access to these partnerships that are running these resources, and you can tap into that there. What was a nice part about surveying the partners was that whether or not they were expecting a reciprocation of those resources. You're probably thinking there's 600 of you, oh my gosh, I have to ask them for resources. They're going to charge us an arm and a leg for it. And to be honest with you, and I was surprised myself, large corporations that said, we're happy to help you if it's necessary, and we don't expect you to return that favor, nor are we going to charge you for it. It was not, we asked them also, how much is it to support all of these resources? And it's about $5,000 a week. And this is 2013 or a 2012, 2013 pricing. So think about what it is now. So those were some strengths that emerged from learning the hard way.
Thank you. You mentioned corporate partners. That's a conversation we're having here as well, is for especially our non-credit programs that are traditionally taught for our industry partners in a face-to-face environment here on our campus or an off-site facility. They are coming from, in our case, usually the auto industry or some manufacturing sector. And we are partnering with them to sort of see what's next for them. What are their goals? Because if they're saying, we really need to postpone this because our workforce is in a different type of situation, increasing that communication helps demonstrate increased partnership as well with our corporate partners. So that is something we've been implementing here at the University of Michigan. John, thoughts on what's been going well?
I think if I can reflect on what happened after Hurricane Sandy, and even now was planning what's going on now, people generally want to help each other. Students want to help each other. Even in New York City, where everybody thinks we're really rude, we're not rude, we're just in a rush. People generally want to help each other, and students will often reach out to other students, faculty students. They'll share things, they'll share resources. There's this great image I have to find it somewhere, where there's a crowd of about 20 students standing around sharing a portable charger for their phones, or sharing that one strip of power on that one outlet on that one generator that works. And all of them are sharing what's going on and, how it things, and give me your phone number. And it's the same thing that happened also after 9/11. I was in 9/11 in Two World Financial Center. The businessman who's upset and crying, being helped out by the college student who's dressed as like a motorcycle gang, like helping him out, helping each other out. A surprising amount of help from people across the board. Surprising amount of people who just want to help each other out and offer, what can I help you out with? Businesses giving away free water after 9/11, where on the streets, people get some water, you're thirsty, helping people out. And I think that's a surprising strength that people don't realize, that yes, there's fear, but at the same time, if you start planning before and involve as many people as possible, and you're open with your communications, giving information and not withholding information, you'll get honesty. And in fact, in Yeshiva, the president of the school gave a radio announcement the last 2 nights with a doctor from that's helping us out, who's giving information to students and faculty. Hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. Sort of sharing information, and that's the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Don't keep it to yourself. Obviously, I'm not sharing a lot of information with you about what we're particularly doing, but that's because we haven't decided to release that publicly yet. But certainly to our students, we're sharing this information. And
yeah. That's a good point, is we're finding among the College of Engineering here and across the university that people are willing to share sort of quick lessons learned, or if they get quick access to a resource, or they're sort of getting permissions or overcoming certain firewalls, we're looking at as a college. And in our case, our IT team is really partnering with our online education unit. And this has been, they have certain abilities. They also have really great students working in that department, which, frankly, might be a really great resource for us too. We have really great students working in our online education space that help us manage some of our technology, and their willingness to be part of the solution is not to be taken lightly. They might be some of our best resources here as well. And I'm thinking, well, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be running various workshops, and those students know that technology intimately. And this is a great project for them to also learn from. So we've found that partnering across our IT teams, but also including students and various other stakeholders that have been support roles, and having them step up into a sort of helping us in the planning mode has been a good strength. Guy, do you want to talk about what has gone well related to the online education component here for continuation planning?
Yeah, so I want to support everything that's been said so far under this question. I have stories myself, but I want to pivot a little bit to another aspect of this question. We are in, obviously, a very unique situation. Even if we compare it to other emergency situations, it's unique. So I think one of the things that everyone can do for themselves and we have done, is to really focus on what's most important right now. And what I mean by that is, I mean, that's an obvious mode to work in a crisis from, but I mean, very specifically, align yourself with what's important to your institution right now. I've been scanning questions, and there's a lot of policy questions, like what are the policies? Well, an emergency is often a situation that you're creating contingency because there is no policy, you know, but you should really try to look to your leadership for what's important now. What's urgent and what's important are not always the same thing. One of the things that in my own environment, we have a fabulous dean of the libraries, was very clear to everyone. We do two things that are most important right now: teaching and research. The libraries does a lot of stuff, but in this crisis, these are the main two things that we need to keep afloat, and our efforts need to go in this area. Many of you may be in units that do a lot of different things. The best thing you can do for yourself is focus in on what's most important now. In our case, it's, you know, we do design, we do faculty development, we do all kinds of things. Right now, I have a team of 24, and on Wednesday, I am going to start a process of preparing the 156 people that make up our library unit to be prepared to play a part in instructional continuity. Because we have identified that for everybody, instructional continuity and the supportive research are primary. Everything else is secondary at the moment. And I think it's important to give yourself a break and to, you know, and to focus. No one in your organization is going to fault you for making this your top priority and letting other things, you know, sort of, you know, wait a little bit. In fact, I think probably your institutions would appreciate that. And that has gone well for us. That's the reason why I'm telling you that. Just stopping and thinking about what's important and what's urgent really helps us know what we have to do next.
Thank you. Luke, do you have thoughts on what this type of contingency planning has emerged in terms of strengths, or what has gone well for your institution?
I think for our size, right, what has gone exceptionally well is our ability to organize very quickly around our focus. So back to Guy's point, we know what our focus is, and we're able to outline the work and then bring teams in. And I wanted to make a comment earlier, Shuba, to John's point about different groups. I mean, we have career technical ed, right? We have industry, and we also have our a significant footprint in dual enrollment. So what happens when high school closes, but we're still open, right? So we have teams, right, that are dealing with those things. Again, remember, you know, 64,000 credit students across 5 colleges in the 7th largest city in the United States. So that was our ability to get really focused on the different types of population. I think it's gone well. I think our ability to say, you know what, we're not going to do non-essential travel. And we're a place that gets invited to present a lot. We are, but we're not doing non-essential travel. The health of our community is important. The thing where I think we are going to continue to work on some clarity are events. And so I differ a little bit with Guy, where we're very, very focused, right, on what it is we're doing. There's still different events that are important to our different constituent groups, right? That, well, do we cancel those? What's the appropriate size for an event? What's the safe size for the event? So that's an area of opportunity for improvement that I think I see us when we move beyond this period of time. The other thing that I think we've done well, but there's been an unexpected or an expected reaction is, we've said very clearly we're in the planning stage, because what we did well was identified our risk levels, and our risk level says we should be planning, right? But we have noticed people have gone to implementing. And so I think you can do your best job to communicate where you are and what you're doing, and then people are going to make decisions, right? And especially in a very large organization, but you still do your best still do your best, right, to communicate the most accurate information to your community. So I'm trying to give you a balance. You know, here's what's worked well. Here's something that's expected. Here's an opportunity for improvement. I'm very proud of the people. At 11:45 yesterday morning, Shuba, I gave a briefing to about 75 people and said, at 2 o'clock, we're going to need help on these 5 things. I need you to come ready to work. I walked into a room full of people ready to work, right? And
that's wonderful.
And I would use that as a point that people want to help. And if you could organize yourself to tap that talent, and that gets you even more buy-in when you move to implementation. So again, I apologize about the long-winded nature of my response, but there's a lot within this question.
There is, you know, we've been talking about here, you know, the question is always, how do you reduce cycle time, right? So if we can speed up the process overall, maybe we can help more people or scale. We've also talked about what's a minimal viable product we can deliver here. So how quickly can we get out as many people as we can help in the time we have, and where are those priorities? So thank you for that. So I know I've already gotten a time check reminder, and I see we have several questions online. I do have one last question, but I also know that a couple of our panelists have to run to, so I'm going to skip this next question, and I'm going to go to key lessons and takeaways, and then I'm going to have our panelists participate there. And then I think we have some questions that are also there, but I'll let our OLC colleagues talk about what to do next with that. But I know, Luke, you have to run, so I'd love for you to share your key takeaways and lessons learned related to this topic.
I would just say to you, there's a proliferation of information about this topic. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is try to keep an eye on that and look for best practices, but pay attention to your own context. Understand your capacity, be attentive to your people, make sure that you're trying to communicate, especially as if you work in a larger organization like I do, give people facts, tell them about where they are now. Don't assume that people know where they are now. You may have to remind them. It's okay to remind people. And we've been saying, remain calm, right? And again, everyone said this, but we're talking about a temporary state, right? And so those are the things that I would say. I'd like to thank OLC and the panelists. It's been really a great opportunity for me to be able to participate with Guy, with John, and with Marlene, and you, Shuba. So I will be off in just a few minutes. I've sent the matrix, folks. Please be kind. It helped us move to core agreements to get us to a bigger place. So hopefully it'll be useful for you, at least the thought leadership around that.
Great.
So that's all.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. John, I know you have a meeting to run to as well.
Yes, I just got a text that says I have to run off to a preparedness meeting because, like I said, we're facing this situation now. Many of you are in a planning stage. I think it's important to remember, take it seriously. Don't get nervous and panic, but take it seriously. You think it's not going to happen. I'm surprised it didn't happen in New York a month ago, right? But even if you live in a smaller area where there's less people, take it seriously and prepare talk to each other, plan, but have a rapid response. What do we do if it happens tomorrow? And I have to go, and I hope I can travel at the end of the month to OLC Innovate, because I am planning to still go, and I am presenting there. Not on this topic, but I am presenting, and if you want to join me, great. Thank you, everybody, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you, OLC, and I have to go run, but this was a pleasure. I wish it was under better circumstances, though. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Guy, you want to talk about some key takeaways and lessons learned?
Yeah, I want to reiterate, I think one of the first things I sent out to the teams that I needed to corral was to be calm. And I would encourage everyone to, amidst, trying to figure out what you have to do, be reflective enough to help people understand the positionality they play in this, situation that we're dealing with. It goes a long way. I shared with the organizers a couple templates of communications that I've been using. Brief people regularly, keep the information clear, accessible, unilateral, so that everyone has the same information. The takeaway from this session, I think for me, is that at one point we had almost 650 people here. We're not alone. We have very different situations to deal with. We have different levels of responsibility. I think, remind yourself of that when you're sitting in your office, ready to lock yourself in because you feel the world is at your door, If there is a way to network this community, to have ongoing conversations, I think that would be great. You're going to kill me for saying this. I think there is amazing potential here to do research. So capture what you're doing. Try to secure the analytics that are going to help us for the next crisis, so that we can look back and say, my point of reference is, and I'm showing my age a little bit here, is N1H1. Like, what did we do during N1H1? And, what did we learn then that we can push forward? Others might look back to Sandy or the more recent emergency, or the one that affected them the most. But try your best to be reflective. But I would say my takeaway here is this community is a rich font. It seems like we're very ready to share things. If there's a way that we can exercise this network more so than we already even are, I think that would be very helpful for everyone as they move forward in this area.
Thank you for that. And I just want to mention instructional continuity appears to be the hashtag that everyone's using. I used it this morning. You should go ahead and feel free to use it as well. And sometimes I like to also make sure I tag OLC. Marlene, I want to give you a chance to talk about some key takeaways and lessons in this sort of journey we've all been focused on in the last 2 weeks.
So you know what, in observance of our time too, and I mean, we've rounded out with all of our panelists, keep it simple. Don't overwhelm your stakeholders, and address your immediate needs, because the state you're in is temporary. Don't forget that. It's temporary. It will pass. So do what you need to do right now to continue having instruction go on. And so if you keep those things in mind, you won't feel overwhelmed, and you'll keep that calm, and you'll make it through it. So just make it through it.
Thank you. I think that there's going to be a time where everyone needs to remember that when we're looking at our own work and priorities. So I want to thank everyone for participating today. It's been an interesting panel. It's been an interesting journey, and I appreciate everyone's work. I want to hand it over to our OLC facilitators for next steps, comments, and how you'll be able to get these additional resources and recordings that are being shared. Thank you to all of our panelists today.
Paloma or
Yeah,
yeah,
Caitlin.
I'll say Caitlin will follow up. What I was going to say regarding all of the questions that we have here, our panelists have offered to answer those questions that they're able to answer, and we will post the answers on our resource page, the emergency preparedness resource page. Do give us about a week to get that up there, just because we know everyone is really busy. And Caitlin, I'll let you continue.
Great, thank you. That was the main thing. And then just a reminder, you can find additional resources that we're continuously updating on our page, like our next webinar that will focus on live online sessions. It's happening on Monday. So sign up for that if you haven't already. And thank you again for attending today. The recording will be sent out tomorrow. And thank you so much to our moderator and our fabulous panelists for helping put this together for our community so quickly. So thank you once again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.